we are in the Wertenbaker's garden, and this is Chris Wertenbaker, and here's his mother, Lael, who, under the name of Lael Tucker, wrote Lament for Four Virgins, that great bestseller. What are you laughing about? That's your mother's book. And Festival, wasn't that the last, Lael?
That was the last one.
Right. Well, Chris.
Yeah.
You're practically a Basque, aren't you?
Well, nearly.
Nearly. How long have you been here in the Basque country?
7 years.
7 years. But you have been to school in America, haven't you, for a while, so you can tell the difference between a Basque school and an American one. Which do you prefer? Going to school in France or in
America.
Why, because you learn more?
No, it's easier.
Yes, well, we do think, don't you agree, Lael, that there is a theory that education and indeed childhood should be associated with fun in America, which isn't shared in Europe.
Here, frankly, I think they get a better education, Orson.
In this tiny village?
In this tiny village, they get the standard...
Better than... Now, Chris went to school, didn't he, a couple of years ago, or for a couple of years, in America?
He went to school for 2 years in America, and he loved it, but I'm afraid the reason he loved it particularly was because it was so much easier. When we came back here, he had to go back. And every child is required to meet certain standards before he goes on.
Which are much higher standards than ours at home.
Which are much higher in almost all fields.
In education.
In education.
Yes.
That wasn't why we chose it for them, though.
Not just to make them work hard.
Not just to make them work hard. That's what we found after we got here. But when we chose it for them, we were really looking for the villages of our own childhood.
Really, what is it you're gaining in this very far away little corner of the earth?
A village is a village, and it doesn't make any difference what language it speaks.
Well, of course it doesn't for a child.
Not for a child unless you tell them so.
Yes.
And here in Ciboure, and probably places at home, but here in Ciboure where we've been able to live and to work ourselves, children walk out of their houses in the morning, kings of their kingdom, free of the streets. They come home when they're hungry or when they fall down. They know everybody in town. They have that sense of independence. And the Basques are independent people, too.
Indeed they are.
Here in Ciboure, the children are living without mechanical aids to amusement.
No, that's very important. Without mechanical aids to amusement. I think that I'm not going to make a speech against the machine age, but an aid to amusement, it seems to me to be at the center of a great part of the moral crisis that we're faced with all over the world now. I don't think we need aids to amusement. I think we have to amuse ourselves. And we are in trouble, bad trouble, I think, when all we have to do is turn a button and have somebody doing something for us on a screen or through a loudspeaker. And kids here don't have all of that.
No, they don't. The boys go out with a plot in one pocket, a ball in one pocket, and a pocket of marbles.
Yes, but of course, I know our friends are going to say they have a ball in their pocket in America or in England, and they have some marbles if they like to play that. But they don't have the softening of life by machinery, which is a danger, certainly, back home.
Well, for one thing, no child here ever expects to go anywhere in a car. They expect to go on their own 2 feet. And it's right back to the days of my youth when a ride in a car is a treat.
That's right.
I still think we're going back, in a sense, to what we had and loved. I don't think we're looking for anything more than all the things we want, such as freedom, independence, discipline, good education, habits which will lead them into a good life, wherever you find it. I don't think it's a matter of countries.
No, of course it isn't. Of course it isn't. But when we begin to speak about the differences of living in different places, we do tend to seem to be criticizing our various countries, our various ways of living. And if we appreciate the Basques, it doesn't depreciate what is often called the American way of life. I think if an English boy, for example, has a nice life for 2 or 3 years in Tuscany in Italy, he isn't betraying his English heritage.
And he won't lose the progress that we're making at home.
Yes, whatever that may be. In our home, it's technological. It's a constant movement toward easier living by means of the machine. But I don't think that progress and civilization go together particularly. I know that's a dangerous thing to say, but I happen to believe it. Dangerous, I mean that I'm likely to start an awful lot of discussion. I think that if you move forward, you are not likely to be very civilized in the process. And the most civilized countries are likely to be those where progress is not considered a very important preoccupation. And I think it's awful good for a kid, and awfully good for us, too, occasionally, to get away from those areas where moving somewhere and getting something done seems to be more important than living in a certain way and being a certain thing.
What we need are intervals, all of us, in backwaters.
I don't think everybody, we grown-ups or kids either, should be hustled through our lives without a chance to examine the things that our fathers and grandfathers knew and valued and which have helped to make our civilization.
And keep them and add them on to what we're getting.
That's it.
Well, in principle, I think all children should be at home for their adolescence, which is a period when you're trying to find out who you are. But childhood is another thing, and that's the time to get that something extra, that sense of growth. That's the time to pick up your second language as if it belonged to you.
The childhood
The childhood, when you can speak without those things that happen to your tongue and mouth that tangle you up so you never can be perfectly natural in another language.
And then there's, of course, the extra richness that comes from having lived in more than one part of the world and in contact with more than one point of view. And that's a defense for giving children some few years in places that aren't exactly homeland. Well, Lael, you've been a working journalist a long time. You've visited and lived in a lot of countries, haven't you?
Quite a few.
Quite a few. And yet you've picked, of all the countries that you've known, you've picked this little corner of France, the Basque country. Why did you make up your mind about that?
Well, it was right after the liberation in France. I came down, took one look, and fell in love with it.
I could understand that. I came down, took one look, and fell in love with it. But I think you're partly responsible, you and your family, because your feeling for this country is very contagious. I was only a few hours here, and I was beginning to feel very warmly indeed toward the Basques. And now I'm really very, very much an enthusiast. Not just to the country, it's a very beautiful country, of course, but it's the people that I think are so exceptional. I wonder why.
I don't know that I'd explain the Basque, which nobody can, but I think that quality of country comes from the people, because you get among these people, for one thing, just like the landscape, and perhaps that's why the landscape feels that way so much, you get a tremendous sense of tranquility. They're not worried about the future.
They're not worried about the future. They live for today.
It's not a question of living for today. They figure they've survived everything, will continue to survive. It's a kind of sense of dignity and of pride and of a business of being so close to each other that they have a sense of nothing being able to happen to them. They consider they've been occupied for I don't know how many hundreds of years now.
Well, they're really the aboriginals, aren't they? They're the first, there's always been the talk about the mysterious Basque language. Where does it come from and all that? Because, of course, they do here in the Basque country and on the other side of the mountains. In the Spanish Basque country, they speak a language which has no roots in any known European language. Isn't that right?
There are one or two odd theories which one scholar will present and another one disagree with.
Yes.
But the only convincing theory about the Basque language I ever heard were two. One was that it was a language of the Garden of Eden. This was
really?
For a while. And the other was...
Maybe it is.
That it was the language of the devil. So you can have your choice.